All right. Friday, June 7th, community call for Meshery. I'll paste the meeting minutes into the chat. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and share the meeting minutes. Okay, good deal. Well, we've got a couple of questions here, some general items to cover today. One of those is whether or not we should move the meeting time to, I guess it wouldn't be 8 a.m. Central, maybe that's a bad suggestion. 8 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Central, 8 a.m. Pacific. And the thought in doing so is that Harshini, Paul, and a few other folks that are in, Anand, other folks that are in different time zones might be able to attend. So right now I think it's, one, it's Friday, so anything really late is, eats into the weekend. But two, it's extraordinarily late. So I'm going to go ahead and tag people here asking them that question in the meeting minutes. To see if we did move the time, would it be helpful to them? Would they be able to attend? So I know we're going to be a little bit light on attendees this week. I think both Nick and Eric of HashiCorp are, I forget the name of the conference that they're presenting at this week, but next week is when we would expect to hear more from them. So we'll follow up on that. I suspect this would be helpful. It would be good to get some commitment from those other folks, though, because I know that there's a couple like Julian as well, who anyway, it'd be helpful if we met earlier. But they are already tracking the meeting time at the current time that it is. So, okay. Next up was we've been talking about the at-scale performance benchmarking. We're running these benchmarks that we've run already, but doing it at scale. I'm committing to submitting the request for some cluster time today. So I did reach out to Pratik, who, for a test plan, really just something of a regurgitation of the test plan that we already have, so that we can submit that along with the cluster, that request, and people can see what we're more in depth at what we're looking to do. Part of what that request is to identify the ideal systems that we would have time on. And so a question to the community is, what would be the ideal gear? Is that, and in my mind, I think maybe there's two answers. That one of these answers is, if we're running on bare metal, then do we may be able to eliminate more variables and be able to experiment with a couple of other software capabilities that are close to metal. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that.
Hey, Gresham, Lee.
Hey, Sako. Very good. Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, good. Just talking about the cluster time and
nice.
What type of infrastructure that we might want to request. So the other way of looking at this is requesting VMs. Such that that's maybe more representative of the majority of people who are going to be running these service meshes. They're likely going to be running them in VMs on a cloud. Not always. Clearly they're going to be running them on-prem as well, but that again might be in VMs. And so the question that we need to ask ourselves and answer is the request here ideally on bare metal, or is it inside of virtual machines? Who else has an opinion?
Okay. But does the bare metal matters in overall? Because most of the use cases you don't have to dig that down.
Right. I think that where bare metal might be interesting. One, there's another variable that's removed from the equation. Mm-hmm. In terms of things to measure, things to account for. Okay, but maybe that's interesting. I think but it's interesting. I think to the service mesh maintainers, the projects, because they don't necessarily need that variable in there. But I think to your point, most people are going to want to see it inside of a virtual machine because that's where they are. The other reason why bare metal is probably of interest is because if you consider Pratik, who's and his research is that is somewhat hardware centric part of his research, and he is looking to understand whether or not particular chipsets or particular hardware capabilities may make a difference, and some of that is abstracted away and you can't get to it in a virtual machine. So
Lee, the only thing is the answer is going to actually it's I think it's less of a preference of the people here versus the capability to run Kubernetes on, because when we are testing actually the service meshes as of today, like now we are running Kubernetes. So if we can, I mean, I don't know, like, if we can, if they have a very, like, close to bare metal way of running Kubernetes.
they do.
Oh, they do? Okay,
Yeah,
fantastic.
I mean,
If they do, then that's perfect.
Yeah, they'll help facilitate for rolling out Kubernetes across the metal machines.
So we can have either option, yeah, as I understood.
That's my understanding, yeah.
I see.
And we can even get explicit about particular sizes that we're looking for and the number of them. Now, I don't know that we're going to be given exactly what we requested, but it's good to start off with the request.
See.
Mm.
But the only thing it's gonna be like, if we pick the hardware, like we need to precisely pick the hardware type. Yeah, that's kind of.
Yeah, or asking for a particular type of hardware. It may be the case that we don't have a choice, but the way that it's presented is that you have something of a choice. Okay, I'm going to take some notes to just document what we said about the potential use of bare metal benefiting part of Pratik's research, and then, but the commonplace scenario being that people are running in VMs. Think about it, I guess. If what we would want is, I'm assuming kind of what we would want is not necessarily a small number of very, very beefy systems, but probably a higher number of moderately sized VMs, so that we can get to a very high number of services, a very high cluster node count. I saw an article come through this morning from a friend here in town, Rob Hirschfeld. Maybe we should reach out to him and ask if he wants to participate, because bare metal provisioning is part of his focus. He recently taken a survey and put out some data on the average sized Kubernetes cluster. That is of interest because I think it's the average size, it's the average company. It's the one that it's not the average as much as it's the mean. What are most people running at what size? So I'll take that note as well. Okay. While I'm doing that, what's
in the end of the day, if you go with bare metal, you have more control over digging down and tune some parameters. I guess that in VMware case we may not able, probably.
Yeah. With bare metal, you'll be able to explore.
Just one gotcha gonna be, in case we, let's say, some optimized parameter, let's say, come up and we advise, and some, let's say, users cannot have that control in their cloud cluster, I guess.
Right. Yeah. Most users will be using VMs, so and not necessarily have this control.
Yeah. Exactly.
Where's valid regarding average queue cluster size? Okay.
How is it like? It will be always available, or we will need to request if we want to do some?
Yeah, probably about 2 weeks is probably about as long as I would expect it of a window of time that we would be given.
Yeah, because for GK stuff I was bringing it down. Sometimes it's costly. It's nice to have this option.
Yeah,
Yes.
really. The thing is this is given. It's probably all given generally just once, maybe a second time.
Oh.
But I think if it's a compelling enough use case, it could be given maybe a few times over for CNCF projects. If it's or if the cluster is underutilized, I think that could be compelling as well. And if those cycles are just going to waste anyway.
Oh, it means for whole Meshery project we'll get once, or?
Yeah, that's my guess. That's probably just once.
If it's per contributor, we can do like each one in
Yeah.
seconds.
That's funny. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's it is in context of a project though.
Okay.
But yeah, if there were a second time where we wanted to come back and it was the set of tests were dramatically different from the first time, I think that's compelling in terms of being able to use it twice.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's good. So we'll push forward. We'll make that request. Garish, you had written, I think, last week about persisting user settings data on the file system and its retrieval. Did we make an issue on this, or did anyone raise their hand to sign up for this?
No, we haven't. I think most of the items that are the to-dos here, they don't have a GitHub issue yet. Those have to be created. So I'm sorry, we never got to it. So it'll be a good thing to first create them for sure. And at the moment, we don't have anybody signed up for it.
Okay.
But I think it is becoming a compelling use case because I'm working on this other Prometheus piece. Or towards Prometheus piece where this would actually be helpful because we would also want to persist some kind of like a board settings or a panel settings per user. So probably like that'll be a good thing for me to actually start working on, or somebody else who can get to it before. It'll be a good thing to work on. But as I've marked, it'll be a combination of both UI and backend work that'll need to be done.
Got it. Okay. We do need we have had the request for a CSV export a couple of times. We probably need to GitHub issue here, but I think part of what we need to consider here is that one of the goals of the project has been to create a performance benchmark specification that captures the result set, the information about your cluster, your environment, the type of tests that you're running. And so I guess the question is what people are asking for. I think when they ask for it, that they think just about the performance results,
Mm-hmm.
and they are not thinking holistically about the fact that they also need to capture their environment
Right.
info.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. So this we probably needs a little bit of discussion about when we facilitate that. I think that probably, let me hear what you guys think, but it's probably appropriate that we do facilitate that. We do let people export the individual result sets that is inclusive of their environmental and test specific configuration.
I'm sorry. My take on that would be absolutely. I mean, without that, like you said, without context, the results are not going to be that meaningful for sure. In the context, there are many more things that come into play, not just not just the infrastructure details, like, but also the version of Kubernetes, version of the Istio or Linkerd you're running, and maybe include like some fundamental information about the application that's running, etc. So
Actually, that's a good point. That should we do it through the command line and kind of bundle it with the test scenario, or maybe from UI that's starting and running all day.
Oh yeah. So by the way, who? There's a bit of background noise there. Is somebody taking some pills?
yeah, I am actually
Popping some pills
Sorry.
on Friday.
Yeah.
Nice. To rephrase what you'd asked, Sako, the question that you're thinking about out loud is whether or not it would be useful to expose, probably through mesheryctl, the ability to invoke performance tests.
Yeah, so basically they cluster all these kind of details and version and what's running, we can run and get through it as well. It's because it's mainly they're gonna be kind of static a bit. So my point is, because in UI you define like test, let's say 5 times and all this load and stuff, and the rest could be taken from the command line if you need this like as an option.
Do you mean in order to gather environment details, maybe consider doing so from the command line?
Yeah, that's just thinking that
Yeah.
you not always need to share like these details, but if you need, for example, you can, for example, give them as an option, hey, you can run the test result and all this saved, and you can share. Most of the time you don't need that like environment specific details maybe, but once you need, you can go from CTL and get it, kind of something like as.
Yeah, I see. As kind of an intermediary. Yeah, I mean, I think that you do have a good point that many of the times that someone is running a performance test, that a lot of times their environment will be the same, or it'll take a little while for it to change. That over time, I think that's one of the pieces of value that people might find as Meshery evolves, that if it does help persist these record sets over time, as they do go to shift in size of instances, of VM instances that they're running, or in size of the number of services that they're running on the mesh, that they can go back in time and track against those changes. But generally, within a short time period, I think you're right that some of their environment is somewhat static. And so even though initially we might just be collecting performance test results and not necessarily collecting the rest of the environment variables, that can be okay. Even now, as they use Meshery in the UI and they give a label, a name to their test, that they could label it in such a way that they would understand what environment that they were in, that the tool itself wouldn't be facilitating the gathering of that environment information, but they could write it down separately and reference it. I think that, yeah, there's a poor man's, that they can hobble along. Right now, Garish, of the work that you've been doing to interface with Prometheus more directly, rather than via Grafana, the direct Prometheus interaction, and the notion that there would be a Prometheus daemon set, like a node exporter, in most environments, we would then be able to collect a lot of that information from there, right? We'd be able to use a combination of that for the memory and CPU resources per node, but we'd be able to use, to your point, Sako, some of like kubectl to garner a bit of specifics about the software environment, and then the specific the service mesh specific adapter that's being used in that Meshery deployment. Each Meshery adapter should facilitate for gathering information about that specific service mesh's version, its configuration, services that are on the mesh. So what work needs to be done to make that happen today for the adapters?
I mean, fundamentally, like everything is actually talking to the Kube APIs. So add the capability to get the infrastructure details, whatever is known to kubectl, or the Kube API server, because I'm pretty sure the API server has quite some information. Like, I mean, we can get the software details, like the API, I mean, the version of the Kubernetes, version of SDA, etc. But also it collects node level details, like the total number of nodes, the CPU memory, etc. Um, so we should be able to get most of the details from there. I think once we do it, I mean, so this would, I would say, I will tie this down with the other effort, where we need to move the common adapter code into a library so that all the adapters can benefit from them. That this would be helpful there, where along the other common code, this could also be moved so that all the adapters could be sending the same kind of information, which we can persist as part of this spec for sure.
Okay. This is making sense to me. I know we've talked about it a few times. I said this on our last call. Sounds like we probably need a spec for this, because if it is going to source from maybe 3 areas, it needs to source from the service mesh, right? And ask about that service mesh. So it needs to source from each Meshery adapter. It needs to then source from the nodes, Prometheus, the nodes themselves. Source from, in this case, the load generator, whether it's Fort.io or other. Right? Like when you think about what's going to be bundled inside of an export result, an export, and then potentially, source from Kubernetes as well. It also needs to source from Meshery. When someone goes in to configure a test, that they're going to say, a certain thread count, a certain number of requests per second for 5 minutes or 20 minutes. Like that data needs to be captured as well. The spec that I was sharing a moment ago, the repo, the one that I was sharing, does that ring a bell, Sako? Let me share it again. I know it's certainly familiar to Garish. It's one within the Layer 5 IO org. The repo is called Service Mesh Benchmark Spec. Today it's really just a YAML file. I know we talked about this probably a long time ago, but we didn't have all the context then. This is intended to be the metadata portion. It's intended to be all the things that we just talked about, except for the actual performance test results. So, this is actually a derivative of Mondar Jogs, who's one of the leads of the Istio performance and scale testing work group. Some of the thoughts that he'd given about such a spec in the past.
These are good finds. Wait.
Garish, as we go to export the performance test results, the latency and throughput, how do you envision the marriage of like this type of a YAML file with those results?
We will probably only capture like line numbers 52 to 56, for example, has samples there. We could so there are 2 ways we can go about it. So every time a test is run, there is a collection of data points that are generated, essentially time series. We can capture, we already are capturing that in our database now. So we could just append it here while also capturing the latencies, because the latency, those are the summary results. But if people are interested in the complete data sets, we should probably have them as well, so that if people want to chart it out and compare them, that'll also be nice. So in addition to the latencies, we'll also have the actual data points, probably but those will be client-side data points. We will probably not include the server-side metrics here, but maybe we could capture some highlighting metrics like the CPU memory, etc. And there are a few other, but yeah, but we need to think about that. Like I know that's a stretch, but at least for the client side part, like we sure can actually include the data points and the latencies there, so that I mean essentially the P50, 75, 90, 99.9, essentially the tail latencies.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And actually, the not only are most probably interested in the summaries, but so too is that a lot easier to provide people as opposed to all of the data points. So maybe for this week, that's probably enough discussion on on that spec. I think we can iterate on it, and maybe I'll take on the task of writing up the spec that I'd referred to before, the design spec, just to help move this one along, because I know, Girish, you're focused. You've got a couple of other things on your plate, and Sako, I think you're still, hopefully still chasing down a couple of items. One is on just updating documentation with respect to GKE deployments.
Yeah, actually, I was working on the command line one.
Okay.
For the probably I can quickly show and get some inputs.
Yeah.
From you. But,
Okay.
the script because I wanted just directly bring it not as a shell version but as a command line. So so I guess you can see my screen.
Mm-hmm.
So okay. So are we? Oh, okay, let me open the So basically, mesheryctl when it comes. So I added separately first as minikube. That's the one you should be able to run it. Kind of it's generating minikube, but actually it's not the minikube one. It's a EKS cluster but the idea is it will generate for minikube. That should work. But then I thought probably adding it as a config, like as umbrella.
Nice.
And then having like platform defining, and we need service account and we need namespace, which could have some default values. But you can also define which will be agnostic, like either GKE or EKS. Because then if we have this option, we will not have this issue. Like, for example, for AWS, we have IAM authenticator, or for GKE, we have gcloud and stuff. So we will not have this, what the shell script basically is doing. So I have still going on for that part, for that translating, and think I'm gonna finish this weekend. That's thing, and just be a config. What do you think? Do you think it's a...
That was going to be you took the words out of my mouth. That was going to be the feedback when you first showed Minikube. So the Meshery config makes a lot of sense. If we step back for a moment and think about the other types of config that people might be thinking about with Meshery, it would be, it might be like, for a given a service mesh, or for a given service mesh adapter, what a specific configuration that they might want to give to that adapter, or they might be thinking about specific configuration of a given performance test, that like maybe they want to be able to configure a type of performance test to run from the command line as opposed to the UI. And so that would be the other context in which just someone who's not reading the docs or not reading the help, so I'm trying to think real quick about other precedents set where you've got prominent CLIs that do something similar. So this is to generate config for a supported platform.
So actually the platform, that's the one we're gonna generate. It doesn't matter, like it can be GKE, EKS, AKS, like basically you will need just to have access to kubectl, Kubernetes cluster, like just to create service account instance. Then you'll create service account and generate the file, which pretty much will be agnostic of the cloud platform. Just for Minikube, we'll have separate option, but maybe for Docker Compose or something others, that could be also some other thing to do, work around. But in 90 plus of the use cases should be covered just by creating the service account and generating config file for it,
Well,
which will come to .meshery depot. And
I mean, I guess, and so Girish, this is something that, just in case you're focused on something else, I'm going to say this and get your input as well, is if you consider that consider that there's certain tooling that people use that they're really primarily used through CLI that that as they go to use Meshery, they may consider that they want to use mesheryctl as like the main way of interfacing with Meshery. Maybe, depends on what they're trying to do. If it's deploy a mesh and then run performance test and then shut it down and gather the results as part of their CI process, which some of the projects are wanting to do, right? Then having that ability over either command line, because that's easily scriptable, or a different API may be of benefit. So when I say that, when you think about the command syntax, the mesheryctl interface for that, when you go to support platforms and you go to do a Meshery deployment on Minikube, there needs to be config generated. When you go to do it on GKE or AWS, or you may need to provide credentials at the command line. When you go to do it for Kubernetes, there's another credential. A lot of times it's kubeconfig, but could be different credentials that are provided. When you go to do that for Docker Compose, anyway, my point is, if you think about that use case, which is more or less the use case that Sako's working on right now for Minikube, what do we consider would be the best syntax for this? mesheryctl platform config, mesheryctl config -p for platform to do something, because people may use meshery config later. If it was just meshery config, they might later, or we may want to later expose certain service mesh configuration. So right now, it won't be too long before Meshery supports using one Istio adapter to speak to multiple Kubernetes clusters running different Istio instances. And it's going to need, if you're interfacing with those different instances over Meshery's mesheryctl, you're going to need to be able to provide that context when you're interfacing with, when you're sending commands. And so if you think about something like that, that's the exact same use case that kubectl has when you go to interface with different Kubernetes clusters. And the way that you usually do that is there's different ways of managing multi-cluster config or multi-config files. But the reason I'm mentioning these use cases is because that's what people think of when they think of config. It's not just, generate config for Minikube. So the question then to us is, to facilitate generation of Minikube config, what should that command look like? Meshery config gen Minikube?
Currently, that's kind of, you can put mesheryctl config -p and probably will be picking, but that also, that's we can define either now or later leave and get more time, just go through and I can just
Yeah. Well,
change
and
accordingly. But I did definitely like your idea heating the API from the backend and for running the test. That's really could be
yeah.
great to think of that. Just basically like record as other tooling is doing, just basically starting the test and yeah. I guess Grish, we should be able to integrate for this part. Yeah, that's pretty much what front end is doing now.
You're on mute. All right.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. I was just thinking about this thing. Completely. There are actually a few things that will first need to happen in Meshery to support this.
Mhm.
So the way Meshery works today is actually, in the sense the UI is actually managing or working with Meshery through sessions. So we will have to bring that capability in the Meshery CTL to support it, or we have to enable the use of some kind of tokens. So when Meshery CTL is trying to talk to like a local host Meshery, then there should be some kind of a process with which it can actually fetch tokens. Now the other thing is, even before you actually go about talking about the specifics, now this is CLI, just like Docker CLI, where the Docker CLI can actually talk to a remote Docker host. So the same way, you can have the Meshery CLI somewhere while Meshery instance itself is like elsewhere. So which means you also have to provide the location of the host, where Meshery is running. So we have to start from there. These will be like Meshery options, like the flags and other main command. Just like we can probably follow Docker spot. And now the config option, if it is generating, if it's just going to help generate config, I think config is okay. Yeah.
We can use like kubectl set context kind of like set config.
Right. Can you tell me what the config does? It actually just spits out the Docker Compose YAML?
So currently Minikube I put separate, but the idea is when you hit the config, you should have the options like -p and minus namespace and service account, for example. If you define or not define using default value, will generate the config file, which we'll put in .meshery folder for you. And which one then you can take and upload to UI.
Okay.
So yeah, that's just to generate a config file, because for GKE and EKS stuff, to get rid of this gcloud or cloud specific stuff, because right now when you do kubectl config view, you get this, which is, yeah, you remember that the issue.
Yeah. So can you run the Minikube config generator as it is right now, just to see?
Yeah, currently, yeah, that's because it's right now for AWS things, but the thing is, it will be the same thing for the Minikube one that's
right
generating. So
right. So
put it here, yeah.
Lee, just like the way you were approaching that, it'll be like Meshery config, and then Minikube would probably be a provider. So just like how Sako was saying, like so like maybe a -p flag, like with a Minikube or AWS, EKS, or whatever. I mean, like we can go that route. But if the config is only to provide a config, like just like kubectl config, I'm pretty sure kubectl can probably do a little more. I think config is okay, but if we are planning to have config as an umbrella for more capabilities under it, like for example, like what Lee was mentioning, like so it's meshery config gen something, which means that we are planning to have config as a bigger capability, while generation of the configs is kind of like a sub capability under that. So we just need to determine like how far do we want to go with that.
Yeah.
Maybe to start with, like we can just start with config and provide Minikube or AWS, just like what I just mentioned, like as a provider. So I think that'll be a good thing for config.
Yep. Okay. Very good. Well, we're at about the top of the hour. Maybe Sako, thanks for demonstrating that.
Sure.
Maybe we'll go ahead and wrap up the community call for the week.
Sako, can you actually do us a favor? Can you actually start a Google Docs where we can actually have a further detailed discussion on the on the different options, like we would kind of have going down the road, so that like other people can also come and join and like kind of voice their opinion. I think that would be good.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we were planning to do with you, like to meet this week. But I guess Santosh, he had production issue. He needed some installation stuff that couldn't make it. But
No
definitely,
worries, yeah. No worries.
whenever you are, because we had last of the community meeting discussion that kind of goes through the design, all this stuff, and kind of the task more go, and which Grish can share the experience that will be more quicker wrap up.
Right.
So
Right.
and yeah, we can all the documentation and stuff. That's I guess I'm not sure for Sunday if he can make it, but definitely let's Grish once you can make this catch up. And
Okay.
meanwhile, I will bring the key and the case class to try to finish that part config.
Awesome.
But we can, and after change anytime leave and you come up with better idea for the
Okay.
what should be the options. But let's
Sounds
let's
good.
close, and as a priority